The views expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of this station.
Welcome to Insights into Northeast Michigan, a WBKB News public affairs program. Insights deals with the issues affecting those in the community, as well as Northeast Michigan and the state. And now, Insights into Northeast Michigan.
Welcome to Insights, everyone. I'm Alexandra Johnson, and April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So today we are going to be speaking with a few members from Shelter Inc. here in Alpena, and my first guest is Val Williams. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Now, Val, you work at Shelter Inc., correct?
I do.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about what does Shelter Inc. do?
Shelter Inc. has been in our community and surrounding area for about 30 plus years. What we do is provide services to support survivors of violence, domestic violence, stalking, dating violence, and sexual assault. We began as a small operation, shelter operation for victims, and we've grown now into an agency that serves 5 counties around Alpena and the surrounding area, supporting survivors of all forms of violence.
Now, you support men and women and children?
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's not just one group of people?
No, we support across the lifespan, men, women, children, anybody really that is either in our service area or able to reach us via phone, email, on our website. We provide services.
Now, Shelter Inc., that is part of a nationwide initiative as well.
Well, we are part of a group of agencies that are funded by the Office on Violence Against Women, which is funded by the Department of Justice. So it is a federally funded program, so to speak. We have some other state programs that fund us as well, but for the most part, agencies like ours are funded federally. So sort of a national network, yeah.
Now, the funding that you receive, how or what programs does that go to help survivors?
Well, we have our shelter program for domestic violence survivors. We also have, excuse me, our sexual assault program, which is not necessarily a residential shelter service. Our sexual assault services could be anything from counseling for trauma, resource sharing for people who need things like maybe to change housing, relocation, some financial or economic justice to get them through a time period of maybe a job change or again relocating. Sometimes people are simply looking for counseling or an advocate to talk to. So that funding really supports our operations, paying for staff, paying for the buildings that we have where we meet with survivors across a 5-county area. So anything really that helps us to provide those services is what that funding goes towards.
So you really do have a wide array of services that you do provide to survivors.
Absolutely. And with our sexual assault services specifically, one of the things that we provide that a lot of people don't realize or talk about because sexual violence isn't discussed is medical and legal advocacy for survivors. So after a sexual assault happens to somebody, if they are wondering about what does a forensic exam process look like, you know, what could I expect to experience? When should I have that done? Should I have that done? What if I wanted to report this assault to law enforcement? What would that look like? We have advocates that can talk them through that process, provide information on systems that we work with and partner with or that we know they might encounter through that process and kind of what they can expect. We do have some local hospitals that we work with in Alpena and also in Iosco County where survivors can access forensic exams and also trauma-informed care where SART teams and local coordinated community response teams are partnering with us to talk about this on a monthly basis and talk about how we can provide services immediately following an assault to survivors so that we can lessen that trauma experience a little bit and just let them know that they're believed and support them.
Now, even though you have all of these resources for people who have been a victim of sexual assault violence, do you find those people who are victims, is it difficult for them to come to you to get those resources?
Sure. I mean, I know statistically 70% of sexual assaults are not reported. So I think that statistic comes from both reported to law enforcement or reported to anyone. And that alone speaks to the fact that people aren't talking about it again. And when we do have someone come to us, we know that it's taken a lot of energy, it's taken a lot of thought on their part, and a lot of thinking about some of the consequences that society puts in place for people when they do speak up and say that they were assaulted. So yeah, I would say it's clearly underreported and also underreported to us, even for our confidential services. And that's something else that's a key to our services, is due to our funding source, which is VAWA, administered through OVW, the Office on Violence Against Women. Our services are confidential. Survivors and victims that come to us hold that confidentiality. It is their confidentiality, and if they ask us to speak to someone else on their behalf, we have a process that we go through with signing release forms and giving us that legal ability to do so. So if somebody came to us and said they were sexually assaulted, that's not necessarily something that we're going to report to law enforcement. So that alone, we hope, creates access for survivors so that they know they do have someone that they can talk to, whether or not they want to go forward with the criminal justice process. We will be there to provide support and talk to them about their options, or work with them through that healing process and support them.
And I'm sure that has to be comforting to victims to know that they can come to you and your organization and everything is confidential, and you can lay out the steps for them as to what's going to happen, what the next step in the process is to recovery.
Yeah, we hope it's comforting. We hope that they will come to us. I mean, we don't want anyone to be sexually assaulted, but what we do know is that it happens and that people aren't receiving supportive services when it does happen because of that fear of what they might encounter, what kind of a reaction they might get. So we really hope to be that entity that can provide the non-judgmental and confidential support that someone might need.
Now, I know you said a little earlier that, is it 70% of people 70% of cases go unreported? Why are people so silent about this?
Well, it's not that the victims are necessarily silent. I think it's that we as a society are silent about sexual assault as a whole. So if I don't feel, or if a victim and survivor doesn't feel that this is a topic that can be brought up and discussed in a way that's helpful, in a way that can help them, then likely they're not going to bring it up. So what we know about sexual violence is that when someone doesn't feel that support and someone doesn't feel believed, even if they did bring it up to you, they're not going to bring it up again. They probably won't want to move forward with a criminal justice process. So even if it is maybe reported to an advocate in a confidential way, or talked about to a friend or a family member, we all, as society, tend to have that reaction. When you read newspapers, you see it. What was she wearing? How much did she have to drink? Where was she? Where were her friends? Why did she leave her friends? Well, she went home with him. So all of these, we lay out all of these reasons why maybe the victim is to blame, instead of listening, supporting, and saying, I believe you, and it doesn't matter what happened before the assault took place, you were assaulted, and not having that really does keep people from reporting it. And again, media impact, seeing, news reports on sexual assault that's happening in our community and nationally, internationally even. As we see that, we're conditioned sort of to believe that bringing it up or coming forward might not be in our best interest.
Now, you said some of the questions society and even we ask are, what was she wearing? What was she doing before? Those sort of things. So are women more likely to be sexually assaulted than men nationwide and even in our community? Women
are, and then when you talk about women of other races as well, the chances or the probability increase even more. Statistics are so much higher. The more marginalized a population is, you really see that sexual violence is more and more common, more and more prevalent, and you're more at risk. For example, Native women, Native American women, or Alaskan Native women 50% of, so 1 out of every 2 will experience
a really, really high statistic.
Will experience sexual violence in their lifetime.
Now, why is that different nationalities are more likely to be assaulted?
Well, again, society, and I'm not blaming society, but I'm saying that we have become a group of people that marginalize certain populations, even the LGBT population, bisexual women, any sort of an identification that you own or that society uses to identify you as a human being that is viewed as lesser than another group, that brings in oppression. So when we're talking about oppression and sexual violence, the more oppressed and marginalized a population is, the more access perpetrators have to that population. We're not likely to believe someone that's more marginalized. We're not likely to create access for services to someone that's more marginalized. They have less finances, less resources. Native American women living in tribal communities sometimes, very limited resources, and maybe in communities where there's not a clear communication between tribal and non-tribal populations. So what sort of services do they have access to? What sort of support and law enforcement even do they have access to? So why would it be underreported and also happen more often, I guess, in marginalized communities would be because people just aren't feeling supported.
Now, with your resources that you provide to everyone, have you received good feedback or heard from more people who say, you know, I know a few people who have been assaulted, and because of what you're doing, they feel more comfortable coming to you and speaking up about the issue?
Absolutely. Most of the time, that's probably the piece of our job and our role in this community that actually I think makes us feel sometimes that we could be making a difference, is just to hear someone say that they feel supported and that it took maybe 10, 15 years for them to talk about it with someone else. Maybe they talked about it when it first happened and they didn't feel supported. Now how much better they feel that they know they can talk about it and they know that they were believed. And a lot of times that's really all someone wanted. So to hear that, it really does make us feel like maybe we're making a small difference. I guess I wish that survivors could go to more people. I wish that we were talking about this more. I wish that this was an issue that wasn't so prevalent because of the silence and because of the lack of people feeling that they can talk about it.
All right, Val, well, I want to thank you and everyone at Shelter Inc. for what you're doing for our community here in Alpena and our surrounding areas. But we need to go to commercial break. But when we come back, we will be talking with Rachel from Shelter Inc., and she's going to tell us a little bit more about what we can do to help this. Welcome back to Insights, everyone. We are continuing to talk about Sexual Assault Awareness Month, which is this April. And for my second guest of the day, I'm here with Rachel Burzak, and she is once again from Shelter Inc. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Now, as we talked before with Val, sexual assault is something that not only our community, but nationwide, people don't really talk about. Why is it so important that here in Alpena and the surrounding communities we start talking about that and get the word out about it?
That's a really good question. I think the biggest reason is because this kind of violence thrives in silence. Perpetrators of sexual violence rely on their victims being silent. They look for people who are accessible, vulnerable, and people who lack credibility. And so when you're looking for that kind of person and you're in an environment where you know this is not an okay thing to discuss, and people probably aren't going to believe you because I found somebody who's not very credible, I know I'm going to get away with what I'm doing, and I can do it over and over and again with impunity. So we need to start talking about it so we can keep each other safe, so we can hold perpetrators committing these crimes accountable, and we can start healing together as a community.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the first time that our mayor here in Alpena has actually made a proclamation and said, we are going to support Sexual Assault Awareness Month.
Yeah.
Right? Yes. So that's really cool for our area. And as I understand, you have quite a few events planned.
Yes, we do. We have a marathon of events planned. I would say probably the 3 biggest ones would be On April 16th at 7 p.m., we are doing a community forum at the Alpena Community College Granum Theater. The theme for Sexual Assault Awareness Month nationally this year is Safer Campuses, Brighter Futures. So we're talking about sexual violence as a whole, but there is sort of an emphasis on sexual assault on college campuses, especially with the new Title IX and Clery compliance laws that were just passed. So ACC has been a wonderful partner, very excited and supportive about what we're doing. So we're hosting it at the Granum Theater. We'll have a panel. I think there'll be 5 of us. Ed Black, the prosecuting attorney, Sergeant Billy Gohl from Alpena Police Department, Karen Bennett, who is the Alpena Community College Title IX and Clery compliance attorney. That was a mouthful. Myself, and then Jason Beatty, who is a Child Advocacy Center physician. And then Ashley McDowell, actually, from WBKB,
yes,
will be our moderator. Yes. So that should be a good time. We are inviting the whole community to attend and to please bring any questions, curiosity, conversation to that forum. We're just looking to sort of start the discussion and get people comfortable talking about this. So that's the first one.
Now with that, I know you said with the title, it's a strong focus on college campuses.
Yeah.
Would you say college campuses are maybe a central area where a lot of sexual assault happens more than other places?
The risk of sexual violence does go up on college campuses. Right now, statistically, about 1 in 5 women and 1 in 16 men and 1 in 5 women experience rape or some other kind of sexual violence on college campuses. And the chances that you know your perpetrator are like about 85%. So it happens a lot more, and it happens probably going to be somebody that you know and that you trust that does it.
Now, with that, does it happen more on college campuses because of partying and that sort of thing?
Well, partying definitely creates a good venue for people to perpetrate sexual assault. Alcohol is very commonly used in sexual assaults. It's great because, number one, it's legal for most people to obtain as long as you're over 21, and it works as both an excuse for the perpetrator to excuse their behavior after the fact, but it's also a great way to make you vulnerable. If I'm looking to make you a victim, it makes you vulnerable, and then it excuses my behavior the next day. I can say we were just way too drunk.
Right, and you kind of lose all of your inhibitions and that sort of thing, so you can just push it off on, well, I'm too drunk or that sort of thing.
And in reality, most perpetrators are feeding their targets drinks, but they're not getting drunk themselves. They might have a few, but they're going to stay sober enough to complete their crime.
Right. So that's just the title of this month's Sexual Assault Awareness Campaign. And that's just one of the activities you're doing here at ACC.
Yes, so the second one, we are screening The Hunting Ground, which is that new documentary that got a lot of buzz at Sundance, and it's released in selective theaters across the nation, but we have been able to secure a DVD copy and screen it ahead of time. So we will be doing that on Tuesday, April 21st. At 2 p.m. at the Granum Theater. It's open to the community, but we also wanted to make it something that like staff and students and faculty would be able to attend. All free of charge, by the way, I should say.
That's good. Can you tell us a little bit about what is the documentary about? So
The Hunting Ground is a documentary that looks specifically at sexual assault on college campuses. It looks at they call it The Hunting Ground because it talks about how the way colleges have been handling sexual assault cases, it sort of creates a perfect area for these sort of crimes to occur. So it talks about different survivors' stories and sort of the experiences they had trying to report to their college, trying to bring legal or academic sanctions against their perpetrators, and all of the different ways that they sort of ran into red tape, were shut down, were blatantly told, we don't believe you, were threatened even. It just really speaks to how much of a risk you're taking as a survivor. Number one, to just keep on going and pursuing your education or whatever other things you want to accomplish in your life, but also what it takes to reach out and tell somebody else what happened to you and to try to get justice done. Like, there's a huge risk that survivors take to try to find justice.
Now, have you seen the film already yourself?
Yes, we got to preview it ahead of time to make sure that just to see what we were kind of getting into. Yeah. So we were able to watch it ahead of time, and it is very, very compelling.
Now, you said that's April 21st?
Yep.
Yes. Okay.
At 2 p.m. at the Grantham Theater.
All right. And then the third event that you're doing, tell us about that.
That will be our Candlelight Vigil. So we're hosting that on Wednesday the 29th at 8 p.m. That coincides with Denim Day, which is an international movement. People wear jeans to support survivors of sexual violence and speak out against victim blaming. So that evening at 8 p.m., we will be hosting a Candlelight Vigil. We'll have some survivor testimony. People will be sharing their stories. We'll do a ceremony and kind of just a nice call to action. It's meant to be more of like a healing type event as opposed to educational and informative as the first two. This is more for coming together and supporting each other.
Now, something that I think is really important that we talk about and share with the community is, what can everyone in general do to help or do to stop sexual assault from happening to people in our area?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. That's a really good question. Number one is just speaking out. Bystanders have a huge role that they can play that a lot of times I don't even think they realize. But if you see, a person who looks clearly too drunk and they need to go home and somebody is leading them away, if you see them being separated with their friends, if you see somebody drop something weird looking in somebody's drink, if you hear somebody trying to get rid of somebody and they're not leaving them alone, these little things that we see happen, especially if we're out, we're going to a bar or something like that, we're having fun on a weekend. These things happen all around us and we push them away. We don't want to get involved. I don't know what's going on with their situation. It's a private matter, but when you see somebody that looks like they might be in distress or that they might need help, just being that good neighbor, that good friend, that good bystander, and saying, hey, are you okay? Is there somebody that I can call for you? Do you need to get home? Do you want me to, get you a cab, something? And if somebody discloses sexual violence to you, and they may not, chances are they're not going to say I was sexually assaulted. They might not have that term or that label for it yet. But if somebody says, I think something bad happened to me, just let them know that you believe them, that you support them, that this wasn't their fault, that it happened, and that you're there for them for whatever they decide to do. Not try to force them one way or the other for what you think is right, but to be there and to believe them and accompany them on their journey.
So basically, it's just about us being aware of our surroundings and aware of what is going on around us, so that we can step in to help, and don't be afraid to help is what you're saying.
Don't be afraid to help.
And don't just be a bystander who says, well, it's not really my issue, that sort of thing, because I'm sure if you were in that situation and then later you found out something did happen, you may feel bad about not stepping in.
Yes, you definitely can. And you'd be surprised the way people, I've had to grab random people and say, hey, you look nice, can you just pretend to be my friend for a second so this dude will leave me alone? And people will be like, oh yeah, sure, absolutely, that guy was crazy, people will surprise you with how much they're willing to help. A lot of times we just don't know how to help when we're in that role. So
yeah, I know that can be the difficult thing, is you do see something going on, but you don't know what to do. But now that you've told us, don't be afraid to step in and help someone when you see something a little bit strange happening around us.
Yeah, if your intuition is telling you something doesn't feel right, chances are something's probably not right. So.
And there's one other thing I wanted to talk about. We hear about this statistic, or a lot of times we're told that people who are victims of sexual violence, they in the future may commit sexual violence because it happened to them. But what you at Shelter Inc. are saying is that's not always the case, correct?
Correct. That's actually mostly not the case. Your risk of maybe becoming a perpetrator can go up, but by and large, most people who experience this kind of violence do not grow up to perpetrate, especially if you have support, if you have help, but truthfully, no. A perpetrator is just kind of it's a separate issue, I think, and a lot of people want to combine those two things, but generally, no, survivors don't become perpetrators. They are survivors.
And it's actually damaging to the survivor to have that statistic put on them.
Yeah, to carry that weight of because something awful happened to me, now I might become that same something awful. That's not how you work through trauma. That's not how you support somebody. And that's scary. I mean, survivors become parents, they become aunts and uncles. They have friends. It's really hard to form relationships to begin with if you've gone through something like that, because you don't trust anybody. But now you have this extra weight of, oh my God, if I get too close to you, am I going to do something to you? If I have children, am I going to abuse them? That's incorrect information, and that's not something that we need to put on a survivor's shoulders.
All right, Rachel. Well, that's all the time we have for today, but I want to thank you so much for being here. And if you would like more information on the events going on in April for Sexual Assault Awareness Month, you can call Shelter Inc. Have a good day, everyone.
Insights into Northeast Michigan is produced by WBKB News. If you have any comments, suggestions, or topics you would like to see on a future show, please email WBKB News. This has been a production of Thunder Bay Broadcasting Corporation. All rights reserved.